All right, we're back with Dr. Wade Fuqua, CEO of Semi-Private Practice, and also Chief Clinical Officer for my practice of almost 200 people, Chenal Family Therapy.
Mhm.
Two-time presenter at PAL Conference. He's presenting on fractional compliance stuff, but we're here today just to hear a little bit about board complaints and things like that. So before we get to that, Wade, give us the quick background on who you are and why you're a little bit of a compliance guru nerd.
Nerd, yeah. Grew up as a professional, work starting in school-based therapy, marriage and family therapist, on into, working in the Medicaid space. And when we brought that into our practice, realizing there was some lifts that we had to make. So that brought in more compliance structure, some reporting, some complaint reviews, kind of relevant to this. Then building in and adding in a CARF accreditation and CARF surveyor status to build out more of a quality assurance program in a friendly way, clinician friendly way. One of the parts of that has been alongside the professional landscape has changed, and more my role has become helping support folks dealing with board complaints.
Mhm.
There's a lot more of them out there right now.
Well, I would love for you to speak to that a little bit. It feels like they're going through the roof. Board complaints, lawsuits, HIPAA investigations, all that. Back when I was first in practice, if you wanted to file a board complaint, you had to print up a piece of paper, you had to like hand write it, you had to mail it in.
Mhm.
I'm convinced now between, fill in the blank web forms, chat GPT, write me a complaint against this clinician and file it, agentic
Mhm.
AI, like we're going to see the number of board complaints skyrocket over things like a no-show fee or whatever. Like, is
Right.
that the direction you're seeing this go?
100%. At our practice, we have, depending upon the day, anywhere from like 150 to 175 clinicians on our between all of our license types. And so in last year, we had probably like a 300% increase in our board complaints. I've already seen this year three that we've dealt with already for 2026. And so some of those are all from the same client, multiple clinicians. And I think a
Mm,
lot of that is due to, and there's some data out there that I'll talk about in my session about the accessibility of reporting through online complaints is just driving these through the roof. You don't have to mail it anymore, like you mentioned. Plus, the need for boards to also investigate anonymous complaints. That a lot of the ones that we've seen so far, several of them have been anonymous. And that also
mm,
makes it really challenging for a clinician to respond. And so, the first problem is that our emotions, our livelihood is on the line, we feel. And
mm.
so we just kind of lose what do we do? And so a lot of my kind of coaching role with our staff and clinicians on these and those external has been let's slow down. Let's talk about this. Let's not panic. This probably is not the total loss of your license for most people. And so let's talk about it.
So yeah, your workshop is entitled a responding to regulatory board complaints, a strategic process, right? So we're
Mhm.
systematizing this for therapists. But one thing caught my attention as I was reading the summary. You talk about a 48-hour rule. Unpack that for me a little bit. What is the 48-hour rule?
Yeah, and there's strategy here, I think, in multiple ways. For leadership at a practice, there's strategy for the ability to help your clinician feel safe and supported. That's huge. I think that I have seen folks be like, you know what, I don't want to go anywhere because of this, and I
Mhm.
don't take that personally as something I've done, but as our practice providing that support. But the 48-hour rule, as I've come to see it, is really avoiding us just throwing everything back to this
Mhm.
complaint. Very much like when we're trained to respond to a subpoena or to a question in a courtroom, is you answer the question asked.
Mhm.
And I think when it comes to board complaints, because again, we feel like our livelihood is on the line, our ability to continue to see people and not know the outcome, we just all of a sudden respond super quick. All folks who want to send their letter back the next day. My first response is slow down, sleep on it for 2 days.
Mhm.
Don't even give me a draft of your response for 2 days, and then just write a draft. And then
Mhm.
so we kind of go through this process, and I'll talk more about it. But part of that 48-hour rule is making room for managing the emotion that goes into it for
Mhm.
us as people. In those moments, I don't think we respond as clinicians. We usually respond as scared people.
Mhm.
And so, providing some just really strategic support as a practice leader will help save your people.
Mhm.
And then knowing what you can give and what you can't give as far as records, like there's other things there we need to know and talk about.
Mhm.
But a lot of it, I think, is about being really strategic about making sure you respond carefully and not impulsively.
Yeah, so that fight, flight, or freeze we get in,
Mhm.
it leads to over disclosure. I mean, people throw everything in the kitchen sink at these complaints. Is that the risk?
Right, absolutely. Just like every single thing that can combat, whatever it is, right? We all know that there are clients who sometimes will throw the book at everything related to you. And so what's challenging there is we want to make sure that we are not over disclosing
Mhm.
things related to the client. Right? They obviously disclose that you're their clinician. And so there's maybe some room there, and we'll talk about what you can say, but making sure we don't say too much as
Yeah.
well. And then I think the other piece is what's the role of AI in this? I was
Mhm.
actually on a webinar earlier about WMFT's new rule about technology in services. They don't use the term AI, but I read some of these, and clinicians don't usually write as lawyers. And so you'll
Mhm.
read a response. I'm like, it feels like a lawyer wrote this. I don't know that they should have. So how do you also make it seem like a clinician too? Like that's
Mhm.
who we are, and we should respond as such. Um, and then the other thing is, when do you bring your liability insurance into it, right?
Yeah.
What's crazy is a lot of them don't really want to talk to you about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let us know when it's going to court, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the AI thing's wild too. It's kind of one of these double-edged swords, right? Like shame on you if you're not using it to kind of see if there's anything missing, and shame on you if you're over relying on it. I think I've got a son in law school. There's a recent court case where a lawyer used AI to make his arguments, and AI just made up cases, and he didn't proofread it close enough. And
Mhm.
then, of course, the judge catches these are you're lying about, so
Yeah.
that idea of using AI to help smooth this over, but AI can't be your reactive defense either
Right.
because it doesn't think like a clinician who's, you know, needs it.
Right.
So
It,
yeah.
it doesn't think like a clinician. It thinks maybe on older versions of the codes of ethics.
Yeah,
There's
right.
some things there that it may hallucinate that we have to be careful about. So I think that having just a clear process is something that any group practice needs,
Mhm.
and even every clinician needs to
Mhm.
be aware because knock on wood, you never know when you're going to get
Mhm.
one. Now the new compliance director at our practice got one recently. And so you just have to be really careful about these things. And sometimes it's not even because it's your client.
Yeah. So let me ask you for one tip before we sign off here. When you think of like biggest unforced errors, if you get the baseball term, like biggest self-inflicted, like when the board files a complaint and they ask for records or whatever, if you're to step in a situation and whether it's a solo practitioner or group practitioner and they're missing this or they don't have this or they did this, what's your biggest face palm of like, oh, this isn't going to help you besides just being reactive?
So I think it's usually down to, and where I've seen it go south, is, and as a supervisor, I've seen this happen as well, is folks who are not deferential to the board
Mm,
and communicating openly if there's this defensiveness, because
mm,
again, we're scared, fight, flight, freeze, that comes through. What we need to keep in mind is the regulatory boards typically are at least majority staffed by peers, licensed
clinicians.
professionals who
Yeah.
could get one themselves.
Yeah.
And so that was a really helpful frame of mind, I think, when you're beginning to write this, rather than thinking of them as the ethics police.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I've in the few that I mean, as a practice owner, you get named in other people's
Mhm.
complaints just because my stance has always been, hey, thank you guys for keeping the field safe. I know this is part of it. I really appreciate you looking into this. I mean, they're humans too. They don't want to be the villain. The other thing I thought of as you were talking about was the how bad it looks to the board when you send back 2 years worth of notes that are all signed on the same day. And this applies to solo practices. If you're a solo practice, I mean, I was in solo practice once. I'll admit out loud that my notes were not on a 48-hour timeline.
Right.
I think there's a lot of solo practices that don't write notes, and maybe they don't need them clinically until they get hit with one of these,
Yeah.
and then you're doing 2 years of notes.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a pin in for my other session related to fractional compliance. Having just a few pieces in place
Mm,
on the front helps you when you get here too, right? So I go to like, what are the couple of pieces of paperwork that I want to send with any complaint?
mm.
Like there's a couple of things there that I know we have in place because we've been intentional about setting up a framework, but then also responding carefully whenever it comes to it.
So fractional compliance, and also you host a monthly compliance kind of brainstorming group, right?
Yep, yep. 90 minutes a month where we talk about, gosh, the whole wide array of things. Last month, January 2026, it was related to the upcoming HIPAA changes.
Mhm.
This month it'll probably be actually related to some AI stuff with the WMFT Code of Ethics change, kind of that, plus
Mm.
client testimonial, like all kinds of stuff. It covers the broad spectrum, including documentation, and you name it.
Perfect. Well, I'll put the link in the description and chat, but they can find all that stuff at semi-privatepractice.com
Yep,
for the course.
absolutely.
So, well,
Hmm.
super excited. You're the guy that keeps me out of lawsuits and jumpsuits, and I'm thankful that I'm able to sleep at night because you're my productive paranoia partner. So I appreciate all you do. Excited to see you in a couple weeks and hear the updates.
Absolutely. See you there.
All right, man.